This podcast exists because conversations don't. Well, not all conversation, obviously, but the important ones don't. Not really. A lot of it is because parents, mothers especially, don't feel comfortable talking about the taboo things. After all, what happens if you admit that you yelled at your kid the other day, or that you daydream of going on a vacation by yourself, or that you aren't exactly a huge fan of the whole mom thing right now, only to be the only one who feels that way? What if you're ostracized? What if you find out that all of your fears and nightmares are true and you are actually a total shit parent? Thing is, you're not. A shit parent, I mean. You aren't alone. And the only way you'll ever know that for sure is if we talk. So, let's talk. I'm Ariana Bradford, and this is the NYAM Project podcast. Hey everyone, what's up? As I've mentioned, I'm Ariana Bradford, and this is episode 1 of the NYAM Project podcast. NYAM, standing for Not Your Average Mom, is dedicated to reminding us of two things: that our journeys didn't end with parenthood, and that none of us are standing alone as we try to figure this whole thing out. You won't just be listening to me. I mean, sometimes you will, but I'm just a nobody housewife in the middle of Oregon suburbia with a foul mouth and an attitude. I'm not an expert or a postdoctorate, and I can only offer one outlook on parenting in general. No, you're going to get to hear from authorities on things like sex, mindset, divorce, and more. You're going to hear real stories from real mothers just like you who all have the same hope: that we become more comfortable with parenthood as a station in life and not as a period at the end of what could be a very isolating and confusing sentence. Take today's guest, for example. Her name is Rayah Dickerson, and she runs her own podcast, Depth of Echoes. Her cast is focused on giving the world a very honest, very heartfelt look into what it's like to be a wife and mother living an everyday life touched by mental illness. She's the wife of well, I'll just let her tell you.
I am a 32-year-old mom of two and the wife of a guy who has schizoaffective disorder. My oldest son, who is 9, has pretty significant separation anxiety and maybe some other behavioral issues that we're kind of working out, and just got into therapy. We've got therapy later today, actually. And so we've been kind of on a crazy journey the last couple years with a lot of psychiatric emergencies. And so we've just kind of really learned to roll with it and figure out how to make the best of it and help other people along the way too. It has never gone the way I hoped it would. Like, I wanted to be all regular with things and be on my game. And it was like, you know what? This is the reality, though, of life with mental illness, is that it doesn't happen on your scale. It's really hard because you don't fit within society's timelines. You have to blaze your own trail. And so we've just been doing it and forging ahead and moving on. If we hit an obstacle and it's several weeks between episodes, it's like, that's how it is. And we'll just roll with it. And it's an interesting life because you have to really be prepared to look differently and be okay with your life looking very differently.
For the uninitiated, schizoaffective disorder is a condition that runs akin to schizophrenia. It can include things like hallucinations, delusions, and mania. The National Alliance on Mental Illness has a great description of the disorder if you're feeling particularly curious about it. If you don't feel like looking it up, you could also just follow along with Rayah. Her posts are often very raw and real, and they go into detail about the battles she and her family fight together. This honesty exists because Rayah shares a very similar opinion to ours: that sharing the hard stuff is the only real way to come together.
My husband has schizoaffective disorder, and that's basically a combination of schizophrenia with a major mood disorder, and his happens to be bipolar 2. And he was pretty much managing it for a while without any medication or anything like that. Was working full time, so 40 to 60 hours a week, like a really great dad. He was going to the gym all the time, playing with the kids. He helped with housework. It was kind of ridiculous how spoiled I was, to be honest. I mean, come on now. But it just got to a point where he broke down, and it was really hard, and I'm not really the kind of person who can silently go through things, because I know really deep down that there's got to be other people going through them. And so it's like just this desperate attempt to reach out to anyone else who's in that void of like, someone else has to be going through this. And I found that through that openness and like just being willing to say, hey, like my husband has this, which I had his permission, and he talked about his mental illness publicly before this stuff kind of started going down. But like, it made it so much more bearable, because I would get messages from people saying, hey, I had this going on, or I went through something similar with my brother, or any of those things. And it was like, we can't stay silent about this, and we need to have more platforms to talk about these things, even if there's other, because of course, like I immediately talk myself down. I'm like, oh, other people are doing stuff, I don't need to, like no one needs my voice too. And it was like, no, we need platforms for more people to be talking and sharing their stories, because it really does affect so many people. And the only way to get that across is basically sheer volume of voices rising up.
So, real talk, I suffer from obsessive compulsive disorder and generalized anxiety. Personally, I know 3 people at least who have suffered through postpartum depression. I have friends who are bipolar, agoraphobic, germophobic, and a host of other things that I'm sure I'm just not remembering right now. We all have, at one time or another, admitted to one another to being afraid of how people perceive us. We've actually stopped talking about our mental illnesses in public at times because we're afraid of stopping conversation or of making people uncomfortable. We've come some way as a society regarding how we see mental illness, but we still have so much more to do. And if you're wondering how to help those in your life with mental illness, or if you're wondering how to help yourself, Rayah has a suggestion for you, based on what helped her get by day to day.
Community. Because I was able to be open, I had people reaching out to me, and it's really hard because people don't know what to do and how to help. And it's hard because you have to be on the receiving end of help too. And we never really want to be there. It's hard to receive help. And things like people bringing over meals, or just having coffee or something, it's hard because it's like, well, I don't need anyone to cook for me. I'm okay with food. And I had to just say, you know what though? Like, I can take that off my plate, even though I'm fully capable of making dinner. I can take that off my plate as one thing less to worry about, and realizing that like my friends don't know how or what to do, but they want to be there for me. And it's a way that I can let them in and let them reach out to me. And so I had friends bring dinner, and then they would stay for a few minutes and chat. And it was such a beautiful boost of support in the moment. Like, they saw me, they were reaching out however they could, even if it wasn't like a quote unquote needed thing. The mechanism, like I didn't need dinner, but I needed the connection. And so realizing that you may not need all those things that people are offering, but if you can find a way to connect with them in it, it will provide so much strength. And you'll hear a lot of stories from other people who have gone through similar things, and that brings a lot of hope too. We tend to focus a little too much on the medical model, and okay, well, what's a better medication? Well, we also need things like community and good diet and really good routines and education and good coping skills. So all of those things come into play too. And it's really community where you can help find those things and help each other balance them. So it's really important to not end up being too isolated, And for some people, like, their community is online, and that's okay. Like, if that's all you can manage is being at home and reaching out to other people online, that's great. Start there, even if it's one or two people.
Despite these struggles, you can hear that Rayah and her family still share so many things in common with neurotypical families. And the whole thing teaches you a lot about not judging others.
With a kid with separation anxiety, it can come off looking like anger a lot of times, and a lot of times it is anger because they don't really kids learn about their emotions. They don't understand them all. And so when they feel a big variety of things inside, they kind of latch on to a simple emotion. So they might be feeling fear and frustration and um, worry about anticipating horrible things, but it all comes out as anger because they don't really know how to make it more nuanced or explain those things. And so I remember thinking, like, we all try not to judge other parents, but we've all been in the store and some kid is having a fit and you're like, "Oh, come on, like do something about that." And I remember the time that it started to sink in that I was changing the way I was looking at things was I just changed like my mom was getting a little bit frustrated and I was like, shit, like she may be being quiet. Like that mom may not be saying anything to her kid because she's trying not to blow the hell up. Because I've been there. Like now it's like sometimes I probably look like the shittiest parent ever because I'm not saying anything or because I look like I'm being really passive because it's like the only thing I can do is try not to make it worse in this moment. And sometimes that looks like silence. And it's okay if you don't have the tool. I feel like it's okay to just not make it worse. Like sometimes you just have to step back and take that role. Like fighting this anger for anger or blowing up or doing whatever is like not the answer. And I don't know what else to do, but I don't want to make it worse. And then, sometimes like you just have to get that freaking milk. And that's all there is to it. Like you have to. I'm sorry.
Or diapers.
Or diapers. Like, come on. Like we could maybe drink water or we could maybe go out without this, but like diapers, come on. Like, what are you gonna do? Like
if only we didn't have to eat.
Yeah. And so it was like, okay, I had to wake up to that little bit of judgment because I was judging myself really too. And I was like seeing myself and all my failures and putting them on other people. And when I started realizing that I was having compassion for other moms and I started having that compassion for myself.
So here's the thing. I get the fear that we have of mental illness. I do. I get how afraid we are for ourselves and our children when faced with it. I mean, the thoughts roll through our brains every day, right? If we have anxiety or schizophrenia or any other sort of mental illness, how will we be good parents? If our children suffer from mental illness, how can they live, quote unquote, normal lives? And the truth is, it's going to be a struggle. Some days it's literally going to feel like a fight to the finish from the moment you wake to the moment you close your eyes. But when we really give it some thought, are we more afraid of the illnesses themselves? Or are we terrified simply of the prejudices and the stigma that come with a diagnosis? We're often afraid of what these things mean for us, and we fear that we'll always feel like we don't fit in or that we won't match up. To this, above all, Rayah offers this advice.
Don't be afraid of a diagnosis, even if it's a significant mental illness. Like I have a kid with separation anxiety disorder, which is it's not too terrible. It's pretty mild to moderate, I would say, on a scale of debilitating. But I have a husband with a very, very serious mental illness. And when he was in outpatient therapy after, I think, time number 5 of being in the psychiatric unit over a 2-year period, his outpatient therapist said, like have seen hundreds of people with his diagnosis, and most of them are in the state mental hospital for 10 to 12-year stints. And I just think like we have so much power, and there's over the outcomes of these things. if at a young age we accept that it's not a death sentence, and it doesn't mean that they're going to have a horrible life. Like, I love my husband. I would not trade him for the world. And so I would say if you're a mom who's looking at your kid like, oh, I'm afraid, what if I get him diagnosed or get her diagnosed? And there's, like, what does this mean for the rest of their lives? Your kid that does not mean they're alone. Give them the tools, because they're not going to be alone. They can have a family if they want it. They can have a spouse if they want that. They're not like, it does not render you useless to society. And the game is changing. And empowering your kid is the best possible thing you can do. And parenting, like, you have such a beautiful and unique opportunity to help your kids form these amazing foundations for good mental health. And I feel like I've already messed up so many times, like with my kids, especially because I have a kid who is suffering with separation anxiety disorder. And it's hard not to take that on yourself and go, oh, I did this. And it's like, it doesn't matter what happened in the past. Like, all I can do is go forward from this moment on.
In the end, mental illness doesn't define us. You can still be loving, nurturing, and attentive. You can still be strong. You are still strong with mental illness. And if you ever need proof of that, Rayah is happy to help you see, both in her stories and in your own. You can find out more about her at depthofechoes.com and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all under the same name. And finally, whether you have mental illness or just know someone who does, hell, even if you don't know anyone who does, please try to remember that we're all more than just one trait. Learn about each other. Stories matter. That's why we're here. The NYAM Project podcast is written and produced by me, Ariana Bradford. You can find us at wearenyam.com or on Instagram or Facebook under the NYAM Project. Thanks again to Rayah Dickerson and Depth of Echoes for today's episode. See you next time.